I'm LaJeannie Williams, the wife of the late Richard Williams.
My name is Adrian Williams. I'm the son of my dad, Richard Williams.
We're here to just talk about his life and what it meant to us as his wife and also as his son. This today would have been our 40th anniversary, and we were married 37 years before he passed away, which was very traumatic for me because we had been through a lot together. He was the recipient of a liver transplant in 1990. And from that time forward, both of our lives changed dramatically. That was something that was not heard of too much at that time. At least I hadn't heard about it too much, and neither had he. And when he found out that he actually needed a liver and that his liver was completely damaged, he said at the time, originally, I'm not going to have surgery. He said, whatever happens will happen. And the Lord brought into the hospital room a doctor by the name of Dr. Kunda, who was very instrumental in explaining everything to Richard and how much success there had been in the area of liver transplantation. He did a lot of research. He checked with all the hospitals in the area to find out exactly where he should go to attempt to get a liver. So Richard agreed to it, and that's where everything started. We had a fairly young family. The boys, our youngest two boys, were about 12 and 11 years old, and our older children were in high school. So we had a lot of decisions that we had to make. And as we went through the processes of him actually getting a liver, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of thought-provoking things, and we decided that we were going to just trust God with our lives and with his being able to get a liver. It took 2 or 3 months for him to actually receive the liver, and when he did receive it, he was near death's door. So we were just grateful to be able to, for him to be able to get the liver transplant. And as a result of that, he was able to live with that liver for almost 23 years. So our family was highly blessed. And I'll let Adrian tell you what he did when he found out that he was going to get a liver transplant.
2 to 3 months is a very short time to get a liver transplant, to get a liver. People stay on that transplant list for months, 6, 7, 8, close to a year. And to get that liver was a blessing. It really was. And like I said, all I need now is the gravy. You know, I could come home from school. My mom's mom was there taking care of my dad. Come in to his room. He'd be laying down, tired, hurting, in pain. And I'd go in and say hello to him, give him a hug, sit down, talk to him for 10, 15 minutes. And I would leave and do schoolwork, whatever an 11-year-old kid would do. And to see his face change one day when I come home, and he got that phone call, and see my mom's mom, Ella Reed, sitting up there smiling, happy because they got this phone call. I was just excited. I was excited to see a change about to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was excited to see a change, see my dad smiling and up and ready to go.
My name is Wayne Mitchell. I came to Dallas in 1985 for the first time and left DC having met Dr. Tony Evans and just never recovered from that introduction. Came here and visited with him, spent a couple of weeks, and then went back to DC and sold my house, actually in Baltimore. I was living in Baltimore at the time. And my family and I relocated here to Dallas in 1986, and that is the year I met Richard Williams. Richard was a member of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, and he was also a neighbor. We lived in a community called The Woods, off Clark Road, and I got involved with something called the Dallas County Youth Village. I was trying to find a job, and Richard had worked there. He had worked at Dallas County Youth Village, and he had told me a lot about this place. I met him at church, and he knew I was looking for a job, and he owned a bakery, and he told me about that place to get a job, and then he hired my wife so she could work at his bakery. And he was a young seminary student with 3 children, 2 of them here, and broke. And so I took a job at Dallas County Youth Village as a night dorm supervisor. And I'll never forget, I had a real bad incident one night. Some kids acted up, and I was this real disciplinarian kind of guy, and I'm just laid the rules down for these kids, and I just made them all do what I wanted them to do and threatened them all. I didn't physically touch anybody, but the next day I got reprimanded by my supervisor saying that you can't just give altercations to these kids. I told Richard about that, and Richard told me that they were right. And then he compassionately shared with me why I was wrong, because Richard knew these kids. He knew what it was like for kids to grow up and not have things. And he started telling me some things about how he felt about young people. And I discovered some things about Richard. I discovered a guy that he was real intimidating. He was real big and strong and dangerous looking. But he had a heart, man. He had a heart of compassion, especially for kids. Time as a youth pastor and working at Dallas County Youth Village. And Richard started telling me about things he wanted to do with kids. And I took his advice on a couple of those things. I mean, he had this dream of taking kids on a historical tour of colleges, on an African-American history kind of experience. And I listened to him very carefully, and I told him I was going to do that. And I did. I took kids on tours of colleges. We went through Alabama and Birmingham and looked at Civil Rights Museum, looked at historically black colleges and universities. And it was all because Richard said so. It was because he said that's what I need to do for our black kids.
I met him in a Dallas club. I was there with 2 of my very good friends, and he asked me to dance. And in the process of speaking with him, I found out that it was his birthday. So we really started our life on his birthday, because we became very close. Within 6 months, we were married. And during that time with my 2 children that I already had, he was so much like a father to them. And he always has been.
There's one other thing I want to tell you about Richard. That very year, it came to be Thanksgiving time, and we were kind of really low on money. And I taught a Bible study at Richard's Bakery, and it was me and Joe Green, Guy Brown, Richard Williams, and 2 other guys, Joe Sam, and a couple other guys. And when we finished that Bible study, I was driving this Datsun. It was a Datsun 380 or something like that. And I went out to start that thing 10:30 at night, and it wouldn't start. The battery was down. It was a 4-speed. And so, you gotta picture this. I mean, I got Mean Joe Green, Guy Brown, Richard Williams, and one other football player pushing my car down the road to get it started, and I jump started that car and took on off. But it was about 30 minutes later after I got home, Richard knocks on my door. And he had a bag of money. And he said, you told us at the Bible study that you didn't have any money. And he said, I don't want you ever to do that again. I don't want you ever to be broke around me and you don't tell me. And he said, the guys took up this money and they wanted me to give it to you. Man, I stood there in that doorway just crying because I had never had anybody do that. There's just some stuff that Richard Williams did that a lot of people don't know about. He hired people who needed jobs. He rescued folks. He did all kinds of things. And I'm not trying to make him a saint because, you know, he would cuss you out in a minute if he got angry at you. But if he was cursing at you, he cared about you. He wouldn't talk about you if he didn't care about you. And so, you know, I miss him. I miss him. He was my best friend. Got back to the room after taking a walk, and he told me, he said, Wayne, keep your family as the most important thing to you. Never forget that family is the most important thing. I don't care what else is happening. You keep your family close to you. You take care of your family.